Hi everyone, happy Friday. It is a beautiful Friday and I hope that you all are having the very bestest day. We were in the middle of chapter 13 when we left off last time. It's the Very Secret Diary. It's the name of the chapter. And it just happens to be Valentine's Day, and so to celebrate, Professor Lockhart had a big celebration in the morning, greeting them all as they went down to the Great Hall for their breakfast. And then he has also gotten some dwarves to deliver some secret, or not so secret actually, some special Valentine messages. And so when we had left off, a dwarf, very much to the dismay of Harry, was delivering a message to him from one of his admirers. And so this is where we were. What's all this commotion? Said another familiar voice as Percy Weasley arrived. Losing his head, Harry tried to make a run for it, but the dwarf seized him around the knees and brought him crashing to the floor. "Right," he said, sitting on Harry's ankles. "Here's your singing Valentine. His eyes are green as a fresh pickled toad, his hair as dark as a blackboard. I wish he was mine, he's really divine, the hero who conquered the Dark Lord." Harry would have given all the golden Gringotts to evaporate on the spot. Trying valiantly to laugh along with everyone else, he got up, his feet numb from the weight of the dwarf, as Percy Weasley did his best to disperse the crowd, some of whom were crying with mirth. That means that they were really laughing about it. "Off you go now. Off you go. The bell rang 5 minutes ago. To class now," he said, and shooting some of the younger students away, "And you, Malfoy!" Harry, glancing over, saw Malfoy stoop and snatch up something. Leering, he showed it to Crabbe and Goyle, and Harry realized that he'd gotten Riddle's diary. And that's where we left off. So we don't really know what the significance of Riddle's diary is because, as far as we can tell, it's just a blank book. But for some reason, Harry feels connected to it, and I'm certain he does not want Malfoy to have it. "Give that back," Harry said quietly. "Oh, I wonder what Potter's written in this," said Malfoy, who obviously hadn't noticed the year on the cover and thought he had Harry's own diary. A hush fell over the onlookers. Ginny was staring from the diary to Harry, looking terrified. "Hand it over, Malfoy," said Percy sternly. "When I've had a look," said Malfoy, waving the diary tauntingly at Harry. Percy said, "As a school prefect." But Harry had lost his temper, pulled out his wand, and shouted, "Expelliarmus!" And just as Snape had disarmed Lockhart, so Malfoy found the diary shooting out of his hand into the air. Ron, grinning broadly, caught it. "Harry!" said Percy loudly. "No magic in the corridors. I'll have to report this, you know." Harry didn't care. He was one up on Malfoy, and that was worth 5 points from Gryffindor any day. Malfoy was looking furious, and as Ginny passed him to enter her classroom, he yelled spitefully after her, "I don't think Potter liked your Valentine much." Ginny covered her face with her hands and ran into class. Snarling, Ron pulled out his wand too, but Harry pulled him away. Ron didn't need to spend the whole of Charms belching slugs. No. It wasn't until they had reached Professor Flitwick's class that Harry noticed something rather odd about Riddle's diary. All his other books were drenched in scarlet ink. The diary, however, was as clean as it had been before the ink bottle had smashed all over it. He tried to point this out to Ron, but Ron was having trouble with his wand again. Large purple bubbles were blossoming out of the end, and he wasn't much interested in anything else. Harry went to bed before anyone else in his dormitory that night. This was partly because he didn't think he could stand Fred and George singing, "His eyes are green as fresh pickled toad," one more time, and partly because he wanted to examine Riddle's diary again, and knew that Ron thought he was wasting time. Harry sat on his four-poster and flicked through the blank pages, not one of which had a trace of scarlet ink on it. Then he pulled a new bottle out of his bedside cabinet, dipped his quill into it, and dropped a blot onto the first page of the diary. The ink shone brightly on the paper for a second, and then, as though it was being sucked into the page, vanished. Excited, Harry loaded up his quill a second time and wrote, "My name is Harry Potter." The words shone momentarily on the page, and they too sank without a trace. Then at last something happened. "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. How did you come by my diary?" These words, too, faded away, but not before Harry had started to scribble back. Someone tried to flush it down a toilet. He waited eagerly for Riddle's reply. Lucky that I recorded my memories in some more lasting ways than ink, but I always knew that there would be those who would not want to read this diary. There would be those who would not want this diary read. What do you mean? Harry scrawled, blotting the page in his excitement. I mean that the diary holds memories of terrible things, things that were covered up, things that happened at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Well, that's where I am now, Harry wrote quickly. I'm at Hogwarts, and horrible stuff's been happening. Do you know anything about the Chamber of Secrets? His heart was hammering. Riddle's reply came quickly. His writing became untidier, as though he was hurrying to tell all he knew. Of course I know about the Chamber of Secrets. In my day, they told us it was a legend, that it didn't exist. But this was a lie. In my 5th year, the chamber was opened and the monster attacked several students, finally killing one. I caught the person who'd opened the chamber and he was expelled. But the headmaster, Professor Dippet, ashamed that such a thing had happened at Hogwarts, forbade me to tell the truth. A story was given out that the girl had died in a freak accident. They gave me a nice, shiny, engraved trophy for my trouble and warned me to keep my mouth shut. But I knew it could happen again. The monster lived on, and the one who had the power to release it was not imprisoned. Harry nearly upset his ink bottle in his hurry to write back. It's happening again now. There have been 3 attacks and no one seems to know who's behind them. Who was it last time? I can show you if you'd like, came Riddle's reply. You don't have to take my word for it. I can take you inside my memory of the night when I caught him. Harry hesitated, his quill suspended over the diary. What did Riddle mean? How could he be taken into somebody's memory? He glanced nervously at the door to the dormitory, which was growing dark, and when he looked back at the diary, he saw fresh words forming. Let me show you. Harry paused for a fraction of a second and then wrote 2 letters. Okay. The pages of the diary began to blow as though caught in a high wind. Stopping halfway through the month of June, mouth hanging open, Harry saw that the little square for June 13th seemed to have turned into a minuscule television screen. His hands trembling slightly, he raised the book to press his eye against the little window, and before he knew what was happening, he was tilting forward. The window was widening, he felt his body leave his bed, and he was pitched headfirst through the opening in the page into a whirl of color and shadow. He felt his feet hit solid ground and stood, shaking as the blurred shapes around him came suddenly into focus. He knew immediately where he was. This circular room with the sleeping portraits was Dumbledore's office, but it wasn't Dumbledore who was sitting behind the desk. A wizened, frail-looking wizard, bald except for a few wisps of white hair, was reading a letter by candlelight. Harry had never seen this man before. Oh, Chilly. He wanted to say hello. It is getting to be a really good part, I agree. I'm sorry, he said shakily. I didn't mean to butt in. But the wizard didn't look up. He continued to read, frowning slightly. Harry drew nearer to his desk and stammered, I'll just go, shall I? Still, the wizard ignored him. He didn't seem to have heard him. Thinking that the wizard might be deaf, Harry raised his voice. Sorry I disturbed you. I'll go now, he half shouted. The wizard folded up the letter with a sigh, stood up, walked past Harry without glancing at him, and went to draw the curtains at his window. The sky outside the window was ruby red. It seemed to be sunset. The wizard went back to the desk, sat down, and twiddled his thumbs, watching the door. Harry looked around the office. No Fawkes the Phoenix, no whirring silver contraptions. This was Hogwarts as Riddle had known it, meaning that this unknown wizard was headmaster, not Dumbledore. And he, Harry, was a little more than a phantom, completely invisible to the people of 50 years ago. There was a knock on the office door. Enter, said the old wizard in a feeble voice. A boy of about 16 entered, taking off his pointed hat. A silver prefix badge was glinting on his chest. He was much taller than Harry, but he too had jet black hair. "Ha, Riddle," said the headmaster. "You wanted to see me, Professor Dippet," said Riddle. He looked nervous. "Sit down," said Dippet. "I've just been reading the letter you sent me." "Oh," said Riddle. He sat down, gripping his hands together very tightly. "My dear boy," said Dippet kindly, "I cannot possibly let you stay at school over the summer. Surely you want to go home for the holidays." "No," said Riddle at once. "I'd much rather stay at Hogwarts than go back to that... "You live in a Muggle orphanage during the holidays, I believe," said Dippet curiously. "Yes, sir," said Riddle, reddening slightly. "You're Muggle-born?" "Half-blood, sir," said Riddle. "Muggle father, witch mother." "And are your parents both—" "My mother died just after I was born, sir. They told me at the orphanage she lived just long enough to name me Tom after my father, Marvolo after my grandfather." Dippet clucked his tongue sympathetically. "The thing is, Tom," he sighed, "special arrangements might have been made for you, but in the current circumstances—" "You mean all these attacks, sir?" said Riddle, and Harry's heart leaped as he moved closer, scared of missing anything. "Precisely," said the headmaster. "My dear boy, you must see how foolish it would be of me to allow you to remain at the castle when term ends, particularly in light of the recent tragedy, the death of that poor little girl. You will be safer by far at your orphanage. As a matter of fact, the Ministry of Magic is even now talking about closing the school. We are no nearer locating the, source of all this unpleasantness." Riddle's eyes had widened. "Sir, if the person was caught, if it all stopped—" "What do you mean?" said Dippet with a squeak in his voice, sitting in his chair. "Riddle, do you mean you know something about these attacks?" "No, sir," said Riddle quickly. But Harry was sure it was the same sort of no that he himself had given Dumbledore. Dippet sank back, looking faintly disappointed. "You may go, Tom." Riddle slid off his chair and slouched out of the room. Harry followed him. Down the moving spiral staircase they went, emerging next to the gargoyle in the darkening corridor. Riddle stopped, and so did Harry, watching him. Harry could tell that Riddle was doing some serious thinking. He was biting his lip, his forehead furrowed. Then, as though he had suddenly reached a decision, he hurried off, Harry gliding noiselessly behind him. They didn't see another person until they reached the entrance hall, when a tall wizard with long, sweeping auburn hair and a beard called to Riddle from the marble staircase. "What are you doing wandering around this late, Tom?" Harry gaped at that wizard. He was none other than a 50 years younger Dumbledore. "I had to see the headmaster, sir," said Riddle. "Well, hurry off to bed," said Dumbledore, giving Riddle exactly the kind of penetrating stare Harry knew so well. "Best not to roam the corridors these days, not since—" He sighed heavily, bade Riddle good night, and strode off. Riddle watched him walk out of sight, and then, moving quickly, headed straight down the stone steps to the dungeons, with Harry in hot pursuit. But to Harry's disappointment, Riddle had led him not into a hidden passageway or a secret tunnel, but to the very dungeon in which Harry had potions with Snape. The torches hadn't been lit, and when Riddle pushed the door almost closed, Harry could only just see him standing stock-still by the door, watching the passage outside. It felt to Harry that they were there for at least an hour. All he could see was the figure of Riddle at the door, staring through the crack, waiting like a statue. And just when Harry had stopped feeling expectant and tense and started wishing he could return to the present, he heard something move behind the door. Someone was creeping along the passage. He heard whoever it was pass the dungeon where he and Riddle were hidden. Riddle, quiet as a shadow, edged through the door and followed, Harry tiptoeing behind him, forgetting that he couldn't be heard. For perhaps 5 minutes they followed the footsteps until Riddle stopped suddenly, his head inclined in the direction of a new noise. Harry heard a door creak open, and then someone speaking in a hoarse whisper. "Come on, gotta get you out of here. Come on now, in the box." There was something familiar about this voice. Riddle suddenly jumped around the corner. Harry stepped out behind him. He could see the dark outline of a huge boy who was crouching in front of an open door, a very large box next to it. "Evening, Rubeus," said Riddle sharply. The boy slammed the door shut and stood up. "What are you doing down here, Tom?" Riddle stepped closer. "It's all over," he said. "I'm going to have to turn you in, Rubeus. They're talking about closing Hogwarts if the attacks don't stop." "What are you—" "I don't think you meant to kill anyone, but monsters don't make good pets. I suppose you just let it out for exercise and—" "It never killed no one," said the large boy, backing against the closed door. From behind him, Harry could hear a funny rustling and clicking. "Come on, Rubeus," said Riddle, moving yet closer. "The dead girl's parents will be here tomorrow. The least Hogwarts can do is make sure that the thing that killed their daughter is slaughtered." "It wasn't him!" roared the boy, his voice echoing in the dark passage. "He wouldn't! He never!" "Stand aside," said Riddle, drawing out his wand. His spell lit the corridor with a sudden flaming light. The door behind the large boy flew open with such force it knocked him into the wall opposite, and out of it came something that made Harry let out a long, piercing scream unheard by anyone. A vast, low-slung, hairy body and a tangle of black legs, a gleam of many eyes, and a pair of razor-sharp pincers. Riddle raised his wand again, but he was too late. The thing bowled him over as it scuttled away, tearing up the corridor and out of sight. Riddle scrambled to his feet, looking after it. He raised his wand, but the huge boy leaped onto him, seized his wand, and threw him back down, yelling, "No!" The scene whirled. The darkness became complete. Harry felt himself falling, and with a crash, he landed spread-eagled on his four-poster in the Gryffindor dormitory, Riddle's diary lying open on his stomach. Before he had time to regain his breath, the dormitory door opened and Ron came in. "There you are," he said. Harry sat up. He was sweating and shaking. "What's up?" said Ron, looking at him with concern. "It was Hagrid, Ron. Hagrid opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago." Well, that's quite the ending to Chapter 13, wouldn't you say? So we had never really known why Hagrid had been expelled from Hogwarts, and so this seems to be a logical explanation for that. But it still leaves me with so many questions about the Chamber of Secrets and why it's open right now. So, coming up, we're going to be reading Chapter 14, titled Cornelius Fudge. We're going to figure out who he is and what he has to do with all of these adventures. And in the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic Friday and a great weekend, and we're going to read together on Monday, and I already can't wait. Take care. Bye.